When you find yourself in the storm, understand this. It's not an interruption. It's the environment. Stop wishing for clear skies. If your mission is bold enough, the storm is part of the process. People often think success happens in calm conditions, with supportive friends, optimal routines, and linear progress. That's fiction. Reality is chaotic, volatile, and uncertain, and if you can't operate under pressure, you're not ready to lead anything meaningful. Thriving in the storm doesn't mean surviving it. It means adapting faster than it evolves. It means building systems that don't collapse when the wind shifts. It means being emotionally self-sufficient when external validation disappears. And above all, it means designing yourself for impact, not comfort. You're not here to coast. You're here to build, even when your hands are shaking. When everything feels like it's falling apart, that's usually the moment right before a breakthrough. It's the system stress testing you. Most people tap out when the friction increases, but if you can endure just a bit longer, if you can make decisions when you're exhausted, if you can still think critically when your confidence is gone, that is when the curve bends. That is when people start calling you resilient, not realizing you didn't feel resilient. You just refuse to quit. Your goals should be unreasonable. Why? Because the world is moved forward by unreasonable people. The ones who aren't afraid to look insane while building, the ones who stay up while others sleep, who solve problems others won't touch because the math looks bad, or the margins look slim, or the timeline looks impossible. And those who are truly built for the storm. They don't look for consensus, they look for truth. Then they act on it relentlessly, no matter how much resistance they meet. This isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the work despite the fear, about investing in execution, not optics, about realizing that the path to something revolutionary is usually paved in rejection, skepticism, and failure. If you're looking for peace, you're in the wrong arena. But if you're looking for purpose, this is exactly where you belong. Ask yourself, are you optimizing your life for comfort or for impact? Comfort avoids the storm. Impact drives straight into it. And if you're built for the storm, you don't complain about turbulence. You study it, you use it, you build through it. The world doesn't need more people who avoid pain. It needs more people who do meaningful things despite it. Stop waiting for life to get easier. Start becoming someone who performs when it's hard. Because the world rewards those who can create certainty in chaos. You don't need permission. You need precision. You need to get clear on what matters and then allocate everything, your time, your energy, your thinking, toward that. Ruthlessly. If it doesn't move the mission forward, eliminate it. If it doesn't teach you something, discard it. If it doesn't test you, it won't grow you. The storm isn't the problem. The storm is the proving ground. The question is, are you engineered for it? Be the person who doesn't retreat when everything breaks. Be the one who builds in the ashes. When it gets hard, go harder. That's where breakthroughs live. That's where momentum compounds, and that's where greatness is manufactured. Not in the absence of the storm, but in spite of it. Adaptation under pressure is the real competitive edge, because the environment rarely remains stable long enough for perfect plans to unfold. In high-stakes arenas, things move fast, and volatility is not an anomaly. It's the baseline. If your success is conditional on everything going right, you're already set up to fail. The world rewards those who can respond in real time, under real stress, with limited data and imperfect tools. While others freeze, panic, or wait for someone to tell them what to do, the person who can stay focused and act decisively gains ground. Adapting under pressure doesn't mean making desperate moves. It means calibrating fast, thinking clearly when the signal-to noise ratio is brutal, and maintaining operational clarity even when the outcome is uncertain. That's not just a skill, it's an edge, because it creates momentum in moments where others stall. Pressure reveals how robust your thinking is. It exposes the gaps in preparation, the lack of strategic depth, the over-reliance on routines, and it simultaneously offers an opportunity to recalibrate those weaknesses on the fly. The person who can do that without losing their sense of mission becomes nearly impossible to compete with. When pressure hits, some people break down and others break through. What separates them isn't talent or intelligence, it's adaptability. It's the ability to modify plans without losing sight of the goal. Pressure will distort perception. It will magnify risks, shrink timelines, create urgency where there's no clarity. And in that chaos, many will retreat to comfort zones, to old habits that feel safe but are no longer useful. Adaptable minds resist that pull. They stay fluid. They don't abandon discipline, but they remain open to strategic pivots. In high-pressure environments, rigidity is a liability. You can't follow the manual when the manual doesn't apply anymore. That's when leadership and adaptability merge. Leaders aren't the ones who recite plans. They're the ones who evolve them when conditions change. Adaptability under pressure is more than resilience. Resilience is about absorbing hits. Adaptability is about repositioning so you stop getting hit in the first place. It's proactive, it's dynamic. It's the process of turning variables into leverage. You develop this edge by putting yourself in uncomfortable situations on purpose. You increase the load until your operating system upgrades. You stop optimizing for convenience and start training for chaos. You don't wait until the pressure hits. You simulate it. You test yourself in harder conditions than what's currently required, so that when the real pressure comes, your system doesn't crash. This isn't about motivation. It's about becoming structurally capable of absorbing stress and executing anyway. That means working when you're tired, thinking clearly when you're emotionally volatile, staying on mission when your confidence is shaken. The human brain is adaptive by design, but most people never push it far enough to unlock that capacity. They spend their lives building comfort around them, not capability within them, and capability is what matters when the storm comes. Pressure also has the ability to compress time. Decisions that could take weeks are forced into hours. Conversations that might drag on are suddenly urgent, and the margin for error shrinks. In these environments, people revert to training. They default to habits, to instincts. If you haven't built those intentionally, you'll default to whatever is easiest, even if it's wrong. Adaptability means your training includes variability. It means you've practiced how to think, not just what to think. You don't just memorize answers. You learn how to frame problems in new contexts. You don't just repeat systems. You understand why they work, so you can rebuild them when the context changes. That's where the edge comes from. Not from having the right answer every time, but from having the mental infrastructure to create new answers under pressure. Adaptation under pressure also rewires your relationship with fear. Most people avoid high-pressure situations because they're afraid of failure, judgment, or loss. But once you've gone through enough of them, you realize those fears are mental noise. You learn how to operate without waiting for the fear to go away. You see fear not as a signal to stop, but as a signal to focus. Pressure and fear often travel together, but adaptation means moving forward anyway. It means knowing that fear is part of the cost, not a red flag, and as you execute through it, you shrink its power. You train your nervous system to stop panicking in the presence of intensity. You don't flinch when the stakes rise. You stabilize, you dial in, and you lead. This kind of edge is difficult to measure in peacetime, but it becomes undeniable in a crisis. When everything is smooth, everyone looks competent. When everything breaks, only a few still perform. That's when the value of adaptation under pressure is obvious. It's in those moments that teams rally behind the calmest voice, the clearest decision maker, the one who doesn't hesitate when others freeze. That's the person with the edge, They don't need to dominate the conversation. They don't need to be the smartest in the room. They just need to be the one who can move when it matters most. And the reason they can move is because they've trained for the environment, not just the goal. This adaptability isn't a gift, it's engineered. It's built through exposure, repetition, and feedback. Every difficult situation is an opportunity to become more fluent under fire. It forces you to clarify your assumptions, your priorities, your emotional responses. It teaches you to separate noise from signal, to act with intent even when the outcome is unknown. And every time you adapt under pressure, you reinforce a new internal identity, the identity of someone who doesn't fold, someone who thinks when others react, someone who moves forward even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or unpopular. That identity is what becomes your true competitive advantage. It's not about how many times you win when everything is going well. It's about how many times you keep moving when everything's going wrong. Adaptation under pressure is the difference between being good in theory and being effective in reality. It's the skill that separates those who plan from those who build, those who talk from those who execute, those who watch from those who create. And the more you build it, the less you fear uncertainty, because you're no longer depending on the conditions. You're depending on your ability to respond to them. Build systems that function in chaos, not just in order, because anything that only works in ideal conditions is inherently fragile. Most people design workflows, habits, and strategies around the assumption that tomorrow will look like today. But reality doesn't care about assumptions. It changes without notice. Markets shift, relationships evolve, environments collapse, and mental states fluctuate. If your systems are brittle, if they require perfection to function, then you haven't built something resilient. You've built something temporary. High performers don't create systems that operate when things are easy. They engineer structures that endure volatility. They assume disruption is coming, and they bake that into the foundation. They create protocols that account for failure, overload, setbacks, delays, and human error. They don't just ask what to do when things go right. They obsess over what to do when things break. Most systems fail because they rely too heavily on motivation or emotion. If your strategy depends on how you feel, it won't survive pressure. People think they're disciplined, but they're actually just consistent in good conditions. True discipline is when the system executes even when you don't want to. It removes friction from starting. It reduces reliance on willpower. It makes the default action the right one. In chaos, the brain looks for defaults. It doesn't want to negotiate every decision. It wants structure, guidance, clarity. Systems provide that, but only if they're designed for chaos. That means redundancy is built in. That means decision trees are created ahead of time. That means there's a clear chain of action when stress spikes. Your system should tell you what to do when you're tired, not just when you're inspired. It should handle interruptions, not collapse under them. It should recover quickly after mistakes, not amplify them. That kind of system is rare because it requires forethought, not just effort. Building for chaos means you prioritize antifragility. You don't just want something that survives disorder. You want something that grows because of it. That means incorporating feedback loops that strengthen under stress. That means analyzing failure patterns and using them to improve, not just patch holes. It means tracking what breaks, when it breaks, and why, so the next version is stronger. Most people view setbacks as interruptions to their plan. Builders see them as data. They adjust, optimize, iterate. They don't protect the system. They evolve it. That evolution creates confidence, not because they believe things will go well, but because they've proven they can adapt when they don't. That's real stability. Not control over the environment, but control over the response. Systems that work in chaos are modular. They're not monoliths that collapse when one piece fails. They're flexible. If one node breaks, another compensates. If one path is blocked, another activates. You don't have to rebuild the whole structure, you just reroute it. That requires thinking in layers. You build core functions that don't change, and around them you create flexible components that can shift. You don't get locked into one strategy. You build a toolkit of responses. This gives you options. It gives you agility, and in chaos, agility beats rigidity every time. The world isn't impressed by complexity. It's moved by systems that function when it's hardest to function. Building this kind of system demands brutal self-awareness. You have to know where your weaknesses are. You have to acknowledge your blind spots. You have to confront the behaviors that sabotage your consistency. If you keep crashing at the same place, you don't need more motivation. You need to redesign the road. Most people repeat the same failures because they never analyze their systems. They try harder instead of thinking deeper. They add pressure instead of upgrading structure, but the system you operate within will always beat the intentions you have. If your system leaks time, focus, or energy, no amount of drive will make up for it. You can only sprint for so long. Eventually, the architecture of your habits catches up to you. That's why systems matter more than effort. Effort burns out. Systems evolve. Chaos also tests how well you've automated key behaviors. If brushing your teeth requires effort, you're not going to do it under stress. If writing, planning, or deep work hasn't been systemized into your routine, it disappears the moment chaos hits. People think automation means mediocrity, but it's the opposite. Automation frees up mental bandwidth for high-leverage thinking. It ensures that essential functions continue while your attention is needed elsewhere. In chaos, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the strength of your systems. That's why high performers don't leave anything critical to chance. They don't try to remember everything. They externalize it. They don't rely on mood. They rely on mechanism. They design processes that are so integrated they become instinct. Even the most well-built systems will fail at some point. That's why you also need systems for recovery, not just how you work, but how you reset. What's your protocol when your mind is scattered? What do you do when you've been knocked off rhythm? If you don't have a re-entry procedure, you stay stuck longer than necessary. Recovery systems matter because chaos isn't a one-time event, it's recurring. You will be pulled off track. You will lose momentum. But with recovery built in, you don't spiral. You re-engage faster. You reduce downtime, and you maintain long-term momentum even through short-term disruption. Chaos doesn't mean confusion, it means unpredictability. And that's exactly why your systems must be designed for range. If you can only execute when your exact conditions are met, then you haven't built anything durable. Durability comes from range. Can you still execute if you're tired? If you're sick, if your tools fail, if your calendar explodes, that's the standard. That's what separates professionals from amateurs. Professionals don't build around their best days. They build for their worst days. They make execution inevitable. They make excellence systematic. They reduce variance. And they control what they can so that when everything else is out of control, the essential work still gets done. You can't predict the storm, but you can design for it. You can build systems that ignore the noise, that prioritize signal, that keep you operational while others collapse. These systems are never finished. They are constantly refined. They're tested under pressure, not just discussed in theory. They're built to survive reality, not fantasy. And they become your greatest leverage, not because they make life easier, but because they make you more effective when life is hardest. Relentless execution beats perfect conditions because the world rewards those who ship, not those who wait for ideal circumstances. Too many people overthink, overplan, and overprepare, waiting for the stars to align before they move. They obsess over optimization without realizing that iteration in motion beats stagnation in theory. Progress isn't made by those who hesitate in search of flawless timing. It's made by those who execute consistently, even when things are messy, uncertain, and imperfect. The landscape shifts fast, and if you're not moving, you're falling behind. Relentless execution is a mindset that says done today is better than perfect someday. It's about momentum, not polish. It's about moving fast, learning fast, and adapting as you go. Perfect conditions are an illusion. There will always be friction. There will always be missing information, doubt, risk, and resistance. If your strategy depends on removing all of those, you're building a fantasy, not a business or a life of impact. Relentless execution starts with accepting that imperfection is part of the process. You act not because everything is ready, but because you are. You commit to action because you know iteration refines everything. What most people call mistakes are just version 1, and version 1 is required to get to version 2. Without execution, there is no evolution. Without motion, there is no learning. You can't think your way to excellence. You have to build it in real time, under real pressure, with real stakes. The people who win aren't the ones who talk about what they're going to do. They're the ones who keep building when no one's watching. They don't post updates for validation. They execute for outcome. They don't spend weeks refining pitch decks. They spend hours testing products. They don't stall waiting for feedback. They create data through effort. Relentless execution doesn't mean reckless movement. It means decisive, informed, consistent action. It means pushing forward when energy dips, when doubt creeps in, when the crowd quiets, because momentum compounds. Every move forward opens up the next set of moves. Every small win builds leverage, and in time, the person who kept showing up outruns the person who kept planning execution under pressure reveals character. When it's hard to move, when the variables multiply, when the risk feels personal, that's when the real builders stand out. They don't slow down when it gets dark. They speed up. They operate when it's uncomfortable. They create stability through output. They don't let emotion override strategy. They know that emotion is temporary, but infrastructure is lasting. So they lay bricks, one at a time, whether it's raining or not. Whether they feel like it or not, whether anyone believes in them or not, that consistency is rare. That level of personal accountability is what creates separation, because everyone talks. But only a few act with rigor. Perfect conditions are also deceptive because they make people complacent. When everything is going smoothly, most people stop pushing. They stop refining. They start to coast. But relentless executors don't ease up when things go well. They stay locked in. They know momentum is fragile. They know performance today doesn't guarantee success tomorrow. So they build while it's quiet. They sharpen while others celebrate. They look for pressure, not comfort, because pressure is where breakthroughs happen. Pressure is where most people crack. And if you can keep executing while others fall apart, you widen the gap exponentially. Relentless execution is also about speed of decision making. It's not about being impulsive. It's about being decisive. You don't need perfect information to move. You need enough signal to act and the willingness to adjust. Analysis paralysis kills momentum, and too much data becomes noise. Relentless execution requires a bias toward action. It means shortening the time between idea and implementation. It means testing fast, learning fast, and recovering fast. It means moving forward when others are stuck in debate. Speed matters. In fast, moving environments, slow movers become obsolete. Not because they're wrong, but because they're late. You gain edge not by being perfect, but by being first with feedback. Every time you execute relentlessly, you build internal credibility. You train your mind to trust yourself. You prove that you don't need ideal conditions to act. That identity becomes armor. It becomes fuel. It makes you resilient because you're no longer controlled by your environment. You don't wait for support. You don't wait for clarity. You build both through movement, and that momentum becomes self-sustaining. Eventually, your baseline becomes someone else's peak. Not because you're more talented, but because you're more consistent under pressure. Relentless execution also filters your environment. People who aren't builders won't understand your pace. They'll think you're rushing or overworking or obsessed, and they'll try to slow you down. But relentless execution has its own rhythm. It's not loud, but it's unyielding. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need permission. It creates gravity. It attracts other high performers, and it repels noise, because at some point everyone wants to be around the ones who keep showing up. The ones who make things happen, the ones who move the needle, not just move their mouths. There will be days where execution feels thankless, where the work is boring, where the results lag. That's when most people drift. They chase novelty, they abandon what works, but the few who stay focused, who keep refining, who keep pushing, that's where greatness compounds, because what starts as a grind turns into a system. What starts as effort becomes excellence. And what started as discipline becomes instinct. Relentless execution isn't about working non-stop. It's about executing with precision. It's about knowing what matters, cutting everything else, and moving on it daily. It's about building internal velocity so that you're not reactive, you're proactive. You're not waiting for opportunity, you're manufacturing it. You're not hoping for outcomes, you're engineering them through repeated action. You will never outperform someone who just keeps going. Because even if they start behind, they close the gap. Even if they hit setbacks, they recover faster. Even if they lose today, they show up tomorrow, and over time, that compound effect makes them unstoppable. Not because they had the best plan or the best resources, but because they kept executing when it was hard, when it was quiet, when it was inconvenient, and when it wasn't popular. Execution isn't about pace, it's about direction. It's about choosing the hard thing daily and doing it until the result becomes inevitable. It's about detaching from drama and locking into data. It's about trusting the process enough to keep building, even when the reward is invisible. That's where the edge is found. That's how the gap is built. And that's why relentless execution will always beat perfect conditions that never arrive. Use turbulence as a catalyst, not an excuse. Because disruption is not a barrier to progress, it's fuel for transformation. When the environment gets unstable, most people instinctively pull back. They wait for clarity, for stability, for things to make sense again. But those who thrive in turbulent times don't wait for calm. They move straight into the chaos and extract momentum from it. They view instability as opportunity. They recognize that when the game shifts, new doors open, old rules break, and leverage changes hands. What looks like a threat to most is raw material to them. They build in the middle of breakdowns. They pivot when others freeze. They accelerate when the system slows. And they do it because they understand turbulence is not the exception. It's the proving ground in high pressure environments. It becomes easy to justify inaction. The excuses multiply, the data gets noisy, the timeline stretches. Most people convince themselves that turbulence is a signal to wait, but the elite see turbulence differently. They see it as a magnifier. It reveals what's real. It tests what works. It breaks what's fragile. And it forces a level of clarity that smooth conditions can never produce. Turbulence doesn't block the path, it exposes a better one. The problem is that most people are addicted to comfort. They interpret disruption as danger instead of signal. They wait for someone else to go first, for the risk to lower, for certainty to return. But certainty is a luxury. Impact requires action under uncertainty. The people who win are the ones who stop negotiating with the storm and start navigating it. The mindset that uses turbulence as a catalyst is built on urgency, not anxiety. It understands that chaos compresses time and accelerates evolution. The rules you followed yesterday may not apply tomorrow, and the longer you wait to adapt, the harder it gets to catch up. So you move. You act. You iterate. You figure it out while others are still stuck asking why things aren't how they used to be. The world doesn't slow down for you to make sense of it. It rewards those who shape it. And shaping it means using disruption as leverage. When everything is shaking, attention is wide open. People are listening, they're watching, and that's the exact moment to create something new. You use turbulence as a catalyst when you stop resisting change and start designing within it. Instead of complaining about what's broken, you ask what can be built. Instead of clinging to the old system, you explore what the new one makes possible. That requires vision. It requires mental elasticity. It requires the ability to shift perspective fast. You have to let go of what used to work and step into what's needed now. And often, that means taking action before you're comfortable, before it's proven, before it's popular. The ones who can do that become the architects of the next wave. They don't wait for opportunity. They manufacture it out of uncertainty. Using turbulence as a catalyst also means embracing volatility in your own process. If you're expecting to always feel steady, focused, and clear, you're not calibrated for reality. High pressure moments will come with emotion, doubt, distraction, and resistance. You don't need to eliminate those to move. You just need to learn to operate inside of them. You learn how to execute with a noisy mind. You learn how to find signal in the fog. You don't flinch when your confidence dips. You anchor to the mission, not the mood. That level of internal control is what gives you external influence. Because when others panic, you become the stabilizer. When others stall, you become the activator. And when others look for direction, you already know where to go. Turbulence increases pressure. But pressure is not the enemy. It's a force you can convert into focus. Pressure narrows your attention, increases your urgency, and reveals what actually matters. It strips away the inessential. And if you can stay present inside of it, you can make better decisions faster. You stop wasting energy on what you can't control. You stop waiting for someone to rescue you. You step up. You become the one who makes the hard call, who takes the first step, who acts when it's hardest to act. And in doing that, you set a tone that others follow. You become a catalyst not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. When you use turbulence as a catalyst, you also grow faster. Every chaotic stretch is a laboratory. It tests your thinking, your leadership, your resilience, your clarity. You get sharper because you have to. You uncover inefficiencies you didn't know existed. You discover how well you've trained, how deep your preparation really runs. You don't have time to hide behind branding or language or posture. Execution becomes the only currency that matters, and that forces you to upgrade. If your system is flawed, you'll find out fast. If your strategy lacks depth, it will collapse under stress. But that's not failure, that's feedback. And feedback is leverage if you know how to use it. People who use turbulence as an excuse wait for things to return to normal. But normal isn't coming back. The pace of change is permanent. The cycles are shorter, the noise is louder, and the only sustainable strategy is adaptation at speed. That's why waiting is expensive. Every minute spent hesitating is a minute lost to someone who's building through the myth. Every hour of overthinking is an hour that someone else is capturing attention, market share, or leverage. Turbulence resets the game, it reshuffles the deck. And if you know how to move inside of it, you gain access to opportunities others can't see. This isn't about reckless motion. It's about intentional velocity. You move with clarity, with precision, with purpose. But you don't wait for green lights. You don't need confirmation to act. You don't need approval to build. You need conviction, urgency, and the capacity to keep evolving. You understand that the game isn't about predicting the future. It's about responding to it faster than the rest, and that kind of response is trained, not wished for. You build it by exposing yourself to discomfort, by putting pressure on your thinking, by testing your systems, by building while others hesitate. Turbulence gives you contrast. It shows you who you are when conditions are far from perfect. It reveals whether you lead or follow, whether you build or break, whether you adapt or freeze. And once you learn how to use it, you stop fearing it, you lean into disruption, you anticipate the shift, you train your systems, your routines, your mind to operate in instability. That's how you outperform. That's how you separate. Because while others are searching for ground, you're building on air, and you're doing it with intent. The people who leave a mark aren't the ones who waited for life to get easier. They're the ones who created momentum inside the mess. They're the ones who found signal in the noise. They didn't need the world to be calm. They just needed to be clear, and in that clarity they moved. They built, they shipped, they led, and in doing that, they didn't just survive the turbulence. They shaped the future that came after it.